The coffin was magnificent. Polished elm with brass handles, lined in white silk, resting upon a catafalque draped in black velvet. Lilies in profusion, their scent so thick it caught in the throat like grief made physical. The church of St. Edmund's in the village of Longmere, Suffolk, was packed to its ancient stone walls. 200 mourners, perhaps more, dressed in the somber black of the English funeral, heads bowed, handkerchiefs clutched, tears shed with that peculiar restraint the English regard as decency, and everyone else regards as repression. The Reverend Mr. Aldrich spoke of a life well lived, of charity, of devotion, of a man taken too soon. And in the fourth pew from the front, sitting very still with his hands folded upon the silver knob of his walking cane, Hercule Poirot listened, not to the sermon, but to something beneath it. A wrong note. A vibration in the air that only he could hear. The instinct of a mind that had spent a lifetime separating the true from the false, and which knew, with the certainty of absolute conviction, that something about this funeral was a lie. The man in the coffin was Sir Julian Rayder. He was 53 years old, a baronet, a magistrate, and the owner of Longmere Park, which was to Suffolk what a cathedral is to its town. The reason everything else existed. His death 3 days earlier had been attributed by his physician to a catastrophic failure of the heart. He had collapsed in his study after dinner, and by the time the household reached him, he was beyond the help of any earthly medicine. So said the death certificate. So said the doctor. So said the widow, the servants, and every soul assembled in St. Edmund's to bid farewell to a pillar of the community. Hercule Poirot did not believe a word of it. The invitation had not come from the dead man. It had come from his daughter. I must explain how Poirot and I came to be in Suffolk at all, for the circumstances were unusual even by the standards of our irregular lives. We had been in Ipswich on a matter of no great consequence. A suspected forgery at an auction house, which Poirot had resolved in 40 minutes and then spent 3 hours explaining to the local police with the exaggerated patience of a schoolmaster addressing children of limited imagination. We were preparing to return to London when a telegram arrived at our hotel. Monsieur Poirot, stop please. Come to Longmere Park. Immediately. Stop, my father is going to be murdered. Stop, I cannot say more by wire. Stop, please come. Stop, Diana Reid. Well, I said, that's direct enough. Poirot examined the telegram with the attention most men reserve for love letters. Diana Reid, the daughter of Sir Julian Reid. I have heard the name. He is a considerable landowner, a magistrate, active in local affairs, wealthy, respected, and apparently about to be murdered. So his daughter believes. Poirot folded the telegram into his breast pocket. We are 20 miles from Longmere. The universe, it would seem, has opinions about our schedule. We hired a car and arrived at Longmere Park as the afternoon was dimming toward one of those long Suffolk twilights that seem to stretch time itself. The house was Jacobean, red brick darkened by centuries, tall chimneys in clusters, mullioned windows catching the last amber light. It sat in a shallow valley surrounded by parkland, an avenue of limes leading to the front, and beyond it the square tower of St. Edmund's rising above a churchyard thick with yews. The door was opened not by a servant, but by a young woman of perhaps 25, dark-haired, pale, with the kind of face that anxiety had sharpened into something near beauty. Her eyes, grey, startling, fierce, seized upon Poirot with desperate relief. You came. Mademoiselle Reid, I presume. Diana, please come in, quickly. She led us through a hall of panelled oak and ancestral portraits. Stern Redes gazing down from their frames as though evaluating whether we were fit company, into a small morning room at the rear of the house. She closed the door and locked it. The gesture was not theatrical. It was the action of a woman who had been locking doors for days. Tell me, Poirot said, settling into a chair with the composure of a man who had heard many terrible things and intended to hear one more. Diana did not sit. She paced, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back, her hands twisting a handkerchief into a knot. My father is going to die. I know he is. And everyone in this house is either responsible or complicit, and no one will listen to me because they think I am hysterical. I do not think you are hysterical, mademoiselle. Hysterical women do not send telegrams. They weep. You have sent a telegram, therefore you are frightened, which is rational, and determined, which is admirable. Now, the facts. She drew a breath. 3 weeks ago, my father changed his will. In whose favor? That's just it. I don't know. He's been secretive about the details, but I know he visited Mr. Travers, his solicitor in Ipswich, and when he came back, his manner was completely altered, agitated, suspicious. He changed the locks on his study. He dismissed his valet of 12 years, a man named Garrett, without explanation, and he began receiving visits from a woman no one in the family has ever seen before. Describe this woman. 40, perhaps. Well-dressed but not fashionable. Dark clothes. She comes by car, always alone, and my father receives her in the study with the door shut. She has visited 4 times. Each time afterwards he is worse. More frightened, more withdrawn. You have attempted to learn this woman's identity. I asked my father directly. He told me to mind my own business. He has never spoken to me like that in my life. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The household. Tell me who lives here. Diana ticked them off. My father, myself, my stepmother, Constance, his second wife. They married 8 years ago, when I was 17. My half-brother, Marcus, Constance's son from her first marriage, though father adopted him. He's 21. Then there's Uncle Lionel, father's brother, who lives in the East Wing. He has debts. Everyone knows it. No one speaks of it. And the staff, Mrs. Purcell, the housekeeper, Hargreaves, the butler, cook, 2 housemaids, a gardener. Your father's physician, Dr. Cavendish. He lives in the village. He's been attending father for years. And Garrett, the dismissed valet. Where is he now? Gone. Left with a month's wages and no reference. I tried to find him, but he seems to have vanished. Poirot absorbed this. Mademoiselle, you believe someone intends to kill your father. Who do you suspect? Diana stopped pacing. She looked at Poirot with those fierce grey eyes and said, with the flatness of a woman who has rehearsed the words until they have lost their power to shock. Everyone. Sir Julian Reid was not what I expected. He received us in the drawing-room before dinner, Poirot having requested, through Diana, an introduction on the pretext of social courtesy. I had anticipated a man visibly under siege, diminished by fear, a shadow of himself. Instead, I found a figure of commanding presence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of iron-grey hair, and a face that belonged on a Roman coin. His handshake nearly crushed my fingers. His voice filled the room the way a bass note fills a cathedral. If this was a man marked for death, he was doing a remarkable impression of a man very much alive. Monsieur Poirot, my daughter tells me you're visiting the area. Delighted, absolutely delighted. He poured sherry with a hand that did not tremble. I'm a great admirer of the criminal mind. From a distance, naturally. You must tell me about the doubloon affair. The papers were maddeningly vague. Poirot accepted sherry he would not drink, and compliments he did not need, with equal grace. He studied Sir Julian as a watchmaker studies a mechanism, the springs, the gears, the tiny imperfections invisible to the untrained eye. You are in excellent health, Sir Julian. Never better. Cavendish tells me I have the constitution of a horse. I intend to outlive everyone in this room. He laughed, a big, warm, generous laugh, and raised his glass. To longevity. Dinner was a formal affair. The household assembled in the dining room, and I had my first opportunity to observe the suspects in their natural habitat. Constance, Lady Redder, was a handsome woman of 45, impeccably dressed, composed in the manner of women who have learned to substitute poise for happiness. She spoke little, smiled often, a social smile, practiced and empty, and devoted conspicuous attention to her husband's comfort. "More wine, darling. The draught from that window. Shall I ring for Hargreaves?" Her solicitude had the quality of performance about it, though whether the audience was us or herself, I could not determine. Marcus Ellery, Sir Julian's adopted stepson, was a surprise. I had expected a spoiled young man, indolent and entitled. Instead, I found someone watchful, reserved, with an intelligence in his dark eyes that did not match his studied air of casual boredom. He spoke to his stepfather with careful politeness, and to his mother with something I recognized only later as warning. Lionel Reed, Sir Julian's younger brother, completed the family party. He was a lesser version of Sir Julian in every respect, shorter, thinner, with the same Roman features softened by dissolution. His suit was good, but not new. His cufflinks were paste, not gold. He drank steadily and spoke in the expansive, anecdotal style of men who have lived beyond their means and made entertainment their currency. He told 3 excellent stories during dinner. Each was designed to draw attention away from the fact that his wine glass was refilled 4 times. "Your family is most hospitable," Poirot remarked to Diana during a pause between courses. "My family," she said quietly, "is a theatre company, and the play they are performing has been running for 8 years. After dinner, Poirot excused himself on grounds of fatigue. In reality, we retired to our guest rooms, adjacent chambers in the West Wing, for consultation. "Well, Hastings? Sir Julian doesn't look like a man about to be murdered. He looks like a man who could murder someone else without breaking a sweat. Appearances, mon ami, are the killer's first weapon. But you make an interesting observation. Sir Julian is robust, vigorous, dominant. A man of that constitution does not die easily. And yet his daughter fears for him. Why? The changed will, the mysterious woman, the dismissed valet. Yes, all suggestive. But of what?" Poirot removed his shoes and set them with geometric precision beside the bed. "Consider the household. A second wife with a son from a previous marriage. A son whom Sir Julian has adopted. A brother drowning in debt. A daughter who feels displaced by the new family. Each has a motive, but motive alone does not make a murderer. What does? Opportunity, means, and above all, character, the capacity to act. We must discover not only who would benefit from Sir Julian's death, but who is capable of bringing it about. There is a difference, Hastings, between wishing a man dead and being willing to make it so. That difference is the width of a human soul." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tomorrow we begin. I wish to speak with Dr. Cavendish. I wish to find the missing valet, and I wish to know the identity of the woman in dark clothes who visits Sir Julian and leaves him more frightened each time. That's rather a full program. Murder does not wait for the convenience of the detective, Hastings. Nor, I suspect, will it wait much longer at Longmere Park." Dr. Cavendish lived in a cottage at the edge of the village, a tidy white building with a surgery attached and a brass plate that had been polished so often the letters had grown thin. He was a man of 60, portly, with the kind face that country doctors cultivate because their patients expect it, and the sharp mind they conceal because their patients do not. He received Poirot with wary courtesy. Country doctors, in my experience, distrust anyone who might question their diagnoses. And Poirot had a way of asking questions that made even innocent men feel they were being cross-examined. "Sir Julian's health?" "Excellent, robust, heart strong, blood pressure steady, appetite ferocious." Cavendish tapped his desk with a pencil. "I've been his physician for 11 years. He'll live to 90 if he keeps off the port." "You have no concerns whatsoever?" The pencil stopped tapping. I didn't say that. Then what concerns you, Doctor? Cavendish set down the pencil and folded his hands, the gesture of a man about to be more honest than he wished. 6 weeks ago, Sir Julian asked me for a prescription. He wanted a sedative, said he'd been sleeping badly. I gave him Veronal, a standard dose, perfectly safe. And 3 weeks later, he asked for more, double the quantity. I expressed some concern and he became, well, unlike himself, irritable, insisted he needed it. I complied against my better judgment. You believe he is taking too much? I don't know what he's doing with it. That's what troubles me. Cavendish met Poirot's gaze. Veronal in normal doses aids sleep. In excessive doses, it kills, and Sir Julian is not a careless man. You think he intends to harm himself? I think. The doctor hesitated. I think someone in that house may be administering the Veronal without his knowledge. In his food, perhaps, or his evening drink. Small doses, building gradually. Enough to weaken the heart over time to create the appearance of natural decline. You have evidence of this? Nothing concrete. A suspicion, a pattern. Sir Julian has complained of morning drowsiness, which is unusual for him. His reflexes have slowed. Last week, when I examined him, his pulse was irregular in a way I did not like. Cavendish rubbed his face. If someone is poisoning him slowly, and I stress if, the Veronal I prescribed may be the very instrument of his murder. Do you understand what that means? It means I've placed the weapon in the killer's hand. Poirot regarded him. You said nothing. To the family, to the police. On what grounds? A suspicion? A pattern? Sir Julian himself insists he is perfectly well. If I make accusations without proof, I destroy my reputation and my relationship with the most important family in the district. Cavendish's face was miserable. I've been a coward, Monsieur Poirot. You have been a doctor in an impossible position. But now Hercule Poirot is here, and the position improves. We left Cavendish with instructions to prepare a detailed medical history and to prescribe no further sedatives under any circumstances. Poirot was silent during the walk back to the house, his cane tapping the lane in a rhythm I had learned to associate with intense cogitation. Veronal, he said at last, administered gradually. It is a method that requires patience, access, and knowledge. Who in the household possesses all three? Lady Reedy is his wife. She has unlimited access to his food and drink. Yes. Marcus Ellery lives in the house. He could tamper with anything. Yes. Lionel Reedy occupies the East Wing. If his debts are serious, inheritance might be his only escape. Yes. And Diana herself. I stopped, troubled by the thought. She wrote to us. She brought us here. But what if that's a blind? What if she's the guilty party, using us as her alibi? Poirot gave me an approving look. You improve, Hastings. You consider the unpleasant possibility. That is progress. He paused at the gate to the churchyard. But I do not think Diana is the poisoner. The telegram was genuine in its fear. I would stake my reputation upon it. Then who? That we shall discover. But first, the mysterious woman. It was Diana who provided the breakthrough. She had done what Poirot would have done in her position. She had watched and waited and taken notes. The mysterious visitor always arrived on Tuesdays and Thursdays, between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, driving a dark green Humber. Diana had memorized the registration plate. Poirot sent me to the local post office, which in English villages serves as both communications hub and intelligence center. The post mistress, a magnificent woman named Mrs. Trott, who appeared to know the parentage, politics, and digestive complaints of every soul within 15 miles, identified the registration instantly. That's Mrs. Garrett's car, Alice Garrett, wife of Mr. Garrett, who was Sir Julian's valet, the one turned off without a character. They live in Woodbridge now. very bitter about it, both of them. I reported this to Poirot, who received the information with a single raised eyebrow. The wife of the dismissed valet visits Sir Julian 4 times in 3 weeks. This is not a social call. This is business. Blackmail, perhaps. Garrett knew something. Sir Julian dismissed him to shut him up. Now the wife is pressing the matter. One possibility, but there is another. Poirot's voice grew thoughtful. What if Mrs. Garrett is not demanding money but offering information? What if she knows something about the household that Sir Julian needs to hear? Something so disturbing that each visit leaves him more frightened. What could a valet's wife know that would frighten a baronet? A valet, Hastings, is the most intimate of servants. He handles his master's correspondence, his clothing, his private effects. He is present at the most unguarded moments. If there are secrets in that house, and there are many, I think, Garrett would know them. Then we must speak with Mrs. Garrett. Not yet. First, I wish to observe the household at closer range. Tonight we dine again at Longmere Park, and tonight, Hastings, I shall provoke a reaction. Dinner that evening was a repetition of the previous night's performance. The same careful courtesies, the same evasions, the same undercurrents. But Poirot, who had spent the day in apparent idleness, wandering the grounds, admiring the garden, engaging Hargreaves in a long conversation about silver polish, now changed the key. It happened during the fish course. "I attended a most interesting funeral last month," Poirot said, with the casual air of a man making conversation. "A gentleman in Berkshire, wealthy, well-regarded, dead of heart failure," the doctor said. Sir Julian looked up from his sole Meunier. "Sad business, funerals." "Indeed. But this funeral was remarkable for a particular reason. The gentleman's wife had arranged every detail in advance. The flowers, the hymns, the readings, all selected with exquisite taste. She had even ordered the coffin, elm with brass handles. One might say she had anticipated the event with uncommon thoroughness. The table went still. Constance's fork paused above her plate. Marcus reached for his wine with studied nonchalance. Lionel continued eating, but his eyes, those soft, dissolute eyes, sharpened. "Some people are practical about death," Constance said evenly. "There's nothing sinister in being prepared." "Nothing at all," Poirot agreed. "Unless, of course, the preparations begin before the death. In this case, the coffin was ordered 6 weeks before the gentleman's heart failed. The florist confirmed the lilies were reserved a month in advance. The funeral director had been briefed on the precise arrangements, the readings, the hymns, the seating. 3 weeks before, there was a body to bury." Silence. "What are you implying, Monsieur Poirot?" Sir Julian's voice was quiet. "I imply nothing, Sir Julian. I merely observe that in certain households, death is not an event, but a project. Planned, budgeted, scheduled. And the person who plans a funeral before the death occurs is not a mourner. They are an architect." I watched the faces around the table. Each reacted differently, and each reaction was instructive. Constance set down her fork with a click that rang through the room. Her expression did not change, but her nostrils flared, a tiny involuntary contraction, the body betraying what the face concealed. Marcus laughed, a short, hard sound. "That's rather morbid dinner conversation, don't you think?" Lionel emptied his wine glass. "Reminds me of old Aunt Mildred. Had her coffin built when she was 40, kept it in the attic. Used to store winter coats in it." He chuckled. No one joined him. Diana watched Poirot with an expression of dawning comprehension. "And Sir Julian?" Sir Julian looked at his wife. Just for a moment. A flicker of his eyes. There and gone. But in that flicker was something I had not seen in him before. Terror. After dinner, Poirot drew me into the garden. The night was cold and clear, stars thick above the Suffolk flatlands, the church tower a black silhouette against a sky of deepest blue. "You saw it, Hastings?" I saw Sir Julian look at Constance. He's frightened of her. More than frightened. He knows something, and she knows he knows. They are locked in a duel, these two. A duel of appearances, of silence, of waiting. Each watching the other, neither willing to strike first. But Constance, she's his wife. If she's poisoning him, why not simply leave? Divorce. Because divorce is expensive and scandalous, and death, well-managed death, is profitable and respectable. Consider Hastings. If Sir Julian dies of natural causes, Constance inherits. The house, the estate, the investments. Her son Marcus becomes the heir to a baronetcy. The widow mourns beautifully. Everyone sympathizes, and within a year the black dress is exchanged for something more cheerful. But the changed will. Diana said he revised it 3 weeks ago. Precisely. And that, I think, is what precipitated the crisis. Sir Julian changed his will, perhaps to exclude Constance, perhaps to protect Diana. And Constance discovered it. From that moment, the timetable accelerated. The veronal. Small doses in his evening drink. Enough to weaken the heart gradually, to create a plausible medical history of decline. When the final dose is administered, a larger one, perhaps concealed in his customary nightcap, the death will appear entirely natural. The doctor will sign the certificate, the funeral will proceed, and a murderer will stand beside the grave in black and weep. He turned toward the house. Lights glowed in several windows. In one of them, Sir Julian's study, a shadow moved behind the curtain. "We must act quickly, Hastings. The funeral, I think, has already been planned. The coffin may already be ordered. We are not preventing a future murder. We are interrupting one that is already in progress." We drove to Woodbridge the following morning. Mrs. Alice Garrett lived in a terraced house near the river, respectable but modest, the sort of accommodation that represents a significant step down for the wife of a gentleman's valet. She was a small, sharp-featured woman with iron-grey hair and the defensive manner of someone who has been wronged and intends the world to know it. She admitted us, reluctantly, having been persuaded by Poirot's card and the assurance that we came from no solicitor and represented no reader. Her husband, she informed us, was not at home. He had taken a position as a hotel porter in Felixstowe, the only work available to a man dismissed without a reference from a house like Longmere. The injustice of it boiled in her voice like a kettle. 12 years my Henry served that man, 12 years without a day's complaint, and then thrown out like a dog. No reason given. No reason. She slapped the arm of her chair. "I told Henry," I said. "They want you gone because you know too much, and I was right." "What does your husband know, madame?" Mrs. Garrett's eyes narrowed with the shrewdness of a woman who has learned that information is the only capital she possesses. "What's it worth?" "It may be worth Sir Julian's life." The shrewdness wavered. Beneath it, something human surfaced. Not affection for Sir Julian exactly, but the residual loyalty of a servant's wife who had spent 12 years adjacent to a household and could not entirely harden herself against its destruction. "Henry found the receipts," she said, "in Lady Rita's dressing table. He was putting away laundry. It was his job, part of it, and the drawer jammed. When he pulled it free, papers fell out from behind. Receipts from a chemist in Ipswich, purchases of veronal, quantities larger than any prescription." "When was this?" 2 months ago. Henry went to Sir Julian directly, showed him the receipts. Sir Julian's face went, well, Henry said it went the color of a candle. White, dead white. He took the receipts and told Henry to say nothing to anyone. A week later, Henry was dismissed. Sir Julian dismissed him to remove a witness. To protect himself, more like. He didn't want Henry caught in the middle. But the way he did it, No reference, no explanation. It was cruel. Henry didn't deserve that. And your visits to Longmere Park? Mrs. Garrett stiffened. Sir Julian asked me to come. He wrote to me after Henry left. Said he needed to know everything Henry had observed. The Veronal, Lady Reed's behavior, whether Henry had noticed anything else. And had he? Mrs. Garrett leaned forward. Lady Reed has a visitor of her own, a man. He comes at night after Sir Julian retires. Henry saw him twice through the kitchen window. Tall, thin, well-dressed. He enters through the garden door and goes to Lady Reed's sitting room. Stays an hour, sometimes more. A lover? That's what Henry thought. But here's the thing. Henry recognized him. It was Mr. Travers, the solicitor, Sir Julian's own solicitor. The revelation sat between us like a live coal. Travers, Poirot said softly. The man who drew up the new will. The very same. Visiting Lady Reid in secret at night, while her husband sleeps upstairs dosed with Veronal. Poirot rose. Madame Garrett, you have been of the greatest possible assistance. I must ask you one more thing. Did your husband keep copies of the receipts? She smiled. A thin, triumphant smile. Henry always kept copies. He's a careful man, monsieur. It's what made him such a good valet. She produced them from a tin box beneath the stairs. Poirot examined them with the reverence he usually reserved for fine porcelain. 3 receipts from Dunbar and Sons, chemists, Ipswich. Veronal, purchased in quantities far exceeding any therapeutic prescription. Paid in cash. The name on the account, Mrs. C. Reed. Hastings, Poirot said as we drove back to Longmere. The picture assembles itself. Constance Reid is poisoning her husband with Veronal. Slow, cumulative doses designed to weaken the heart. Her accomplice is Travers, the family solicitor, who visits her secretly and who, I suspect, has been advising her on the legal and financial consequences of Sir Julian's death. But Sir Julian knows. Mrs. Garrett told us. He saw the receipts. He changed his will. Why hasn't he gone to the police? Because, mon ami, Sir Julian is trapped. He is being poisoned by his wife, advised by his own solicitor against his interests, and surrounded by a household in which he cannot be certain who is loyal. He dismissed Garrett to protect him. He changed his will to protect Diana. And he is fighting back in the only way he knows, quietly, alone, hoping to gather enough evidence to act. Then we must tell him what we know. Not yet. Poirot's voice was sharp. If we reveal our hand too soon, Constance will accelerate the timetable. She may administer a fatal dose tonight before we can prevent it. No, we must set a trap, and the trap must be perfect, because we will have only one chance. Poirot spent the remainder of the afternoon in consultation with Diana, speaking in low tones behind the locked door of the morning room. I was dispatched on 2 errands. The first to the village post office, where I sent a telegram to Inspector Japp at Scotland Yard, requesting his presence at Longmere Park the following day, and the second to Dr. Cavendish, with instructions that Poirot wished him to attend dinner that evening and to bring his medical bag. The dinner itself was Poirot's stage. He had arranged the seating with the precision of a chess master positioning pieces. Sir Julian at the head, Constance to his right, Marcus opposite her, Lionel at the far end, Diana beside Poirot, Cavendish beside me, and an empty chair, which Poirot had requested, and which sat at the table like an uninvited guest. "Who's the extra place for?" Lionel asked, gesturing with his wine-glass. "For someone who has not yet arrived," Poirot said pleasantly. The first course was served. Conversation was strained. Sir Julian ate with his usual vigor, but his eyes kept returning to the empty chair. Constance maintained her flawless composure, though I noticed she did not drink her wine. During the soup, Poirot began. "Sir Julian, I must confess, my visit to Longmere is not entirely social. The table fell silent. "I have been engaged by a member of your household to investigate a matter of grave concern. I speak of an attempt upon your life." Sir Julian set down his spoon. His face underwent several transformations in rapid sequence. Surprise, anger, fear, and finally something I can only call exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who has been carrying a secret alone and has at last been relieved of the burden. "Diana," he said, "you brought him here?" "Yes, father, and I would do it again." Sir Julian looked at Poirot. "You know then?" "I know that you are being poisoned. Veronal, administered in your evening drink, your nightcap of warm milk, I believe, in doses calculated to weaken the heart over time. I know that the veronal was purchased by your wife from a chemist in Ipswich. I know that your solicitor, Mr. Travers, has been visiting Lady Reed in secret. And I know that you changed your will 3 weeks ago to protect your daughter because you feared you would not survive long enough to expose the conspiracy by other means." The room was absolutely still. Constance had gone white, not the white of guilt, which often manifests as flushed denial, but the white of a woman who has been struck and is deciding how to fall. Marcus half rose from his chair. "This is outrageous. You're accusing my mother." "Sit down, Marcus." Sir Julian's voice was iron. "Let him finish." "I do not accuse, Sir Julian. I present facts. The receipts from Dunbar and Sons bear Lady Reed's name. Your former valet discovered them and brought them to your attention. You dismissed him to remove him from danger. And Mrs. Garrett, his wife, has been visiting you to provide further evidence." Constance spoke. Her voice was perfectly controlled. The voice of a woman who has prepared for this moment. "Julian, this is absurd. I purchased veronal for my own use. I suffer from insomnia. You know this. Dr. Cavendish himself will confirm." "I prescribed veronal for Sir Julian," Cavendish interrupted quietly. "Not for you, Lady Reed. I have no record of treating you for insomnia. If you required sedatives, you did not consult me." The silence that followed was devastating. Constance's composure cracked. Not completely. She was too disciplined for that, but the hairlines were visible. In her eyes, calculation gave way to something raw. "I see," she said. "You have all decided. The wicked stepmother, the scheming second wife. How convenient, how tidy." "Constance," Sir Julian began. "No." She stood, her chair scraped against the floor. "I will not sit here and be accused by a Belgian detective and a country doctor. If you have evidence, take it to the police. If you don't, then I suggest you stop playing parlor games with my life." She walked to the door. And then, just as her hand reached the handle, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Hargreaves, imperturbable as always, moved through the hall. The front door opened. Voices, low, male, official. The butler appeared in the dining room doorway. "Inspector Japp, sir, of Scotland Yard, and a Mr. Travers. The inspector says Mr. Travers is assisting with inquiries." Constance's hand fell from the door handle. She turned, and in that turn, in that single involuntary rotation, I saw the architecture of her composure collapse. The eyes widened, the lips parted. The color that had drained from her face did not return. Japp entered, compact, sharp, familiar, with Travers in his wake. The solicitor was a tall, cadaverous man in a dark suit, and he looked precisely like what he was, a man who had been extracted from his office by police and was reconsidering every decision he had ever made. "Evening, Poirot," Japp said. "Got your telegram. Picked up Mr. Travers on the way, as suggested." He looked at Constance. "Lady Reed, I wonder if you might sit down. We've got rather a lot to discuss. It is one thing to construct a theory. It is another to watch it confirmed in the face of the guilty." Travers broke within minutes. He was not, I think, a wicked man, merely a weak one, The kind who drifts into complicity the way a swimmer drifts into a current and only realizes how far he has been carried when the shore disappears. He had been Constance's lover for 2 years. The affair had begun during a period when Sir Julian was abroad on county business, a magistrate's tour of assizes courts, and had continued in the stolen hours of late-night visits, the garden door, the sitting room with its curtains drawn. But the affair was not the substance of the crime. It was the engine. Constance had approached Travers 6 months ago with a proposition. Sir Julian's health was declining. She would see to that. When he died, the estate would pass to her under the existing will. But there was a complication. Diana. Sir Julian adored his daughter and had always intended to leave the bulk of the estate to her. If the will remained unchanged, Constance would receive the house and a life interest, but the capital, the investments, the land, the real wealth, would go to Diana. Travers's role was simple. As Sir Julian's solicitor, he had access to the existing will and the knowledge to create a new one, a forgery, indistinguishable from the real thing, that would redirect the estate to Constance and Marcus. The forged will would be substituted after Sir Julian's death, and the original destroyed. But Sir Julian discovered the plan, Poirot said. Or rather, he discovered the Veronal receipts through Garrett and became suspicious. He visited you, Mr. Travers, and asked to change his will, not knowing you were the very man conspiring against him. Travers, who had turned the color of old porridge, nodded. He came to my office, asked me to draw up a new will, leaving everything to Diana, with provision for Constance's maintenance, but nothing more. God forgive me, I drew it up as he requested, but I told Constance immediately. And she panicked. She accelerated everything. The doses increased. She wanted it done before the new will could be... He stopped. His voice had disintegrated. Before the new will could be signed, Poirot supplied. It was signed. This from Sir Julian, who had listened to the confession with the terrible stillness of a man watching his own house burn. I signed it 3 weeks ago, in Travers' office. Yes, Travers whispered. You signed it, and I witnessed it, and then I placed it in my safe, where it remains. You did not destroy it? I couldn't, Travers covered his face. I am his solicitor. Whatever else I've done, I could not destroy a valid testamentary document. The law is... He made a strangled sound. The law was all I had left. Japp, who had been taking notes with the methodical satisfaction of a man doing his favorite work, looked up. Lady Reed, do you wish to make a statement? Constance sat at the table like a marble figure. She had not spoken since Travers began his confession. Her face was a mask of such perfect, crystalline fury that it was almost beautiful. I have nothing to say, she replied, to any of you. Very well. Japp closed his notebook. Constance Rader, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the attempted murder of Sir Julian Ridet. Mr. Travers, you will accompany us to the station to make a formal statement. You may wish to consult a solicitor. He paused. A different solicitor. They were taken away in Japp's motor car. Constance rigid, Travers crumpled. And the house, emptied of its conspirators, seemed to exhale. The grandfather clock in the hall resumed its ticking with what sounded like relief. Sir Julian sat alone in the drawing-room. He had not moved from his chair. The fire had burned low, casting shadows that made his face look older, softer, stripped of the commanding vigor that had impressed me 2 days before. Without the audience, without the performance, he was simply a man who had been betrayed by the woman he slept beside every night. Poirot entered quietly. I followed, feeling the intruder but unwilling to leave. Sir Julian, Monsieur Poirot, the baronet's voice was hoarse, you have saved my life. I should thank you. You should thank your daughter. She had the courage to act when you did not. The rebuke was gentle, but Sir Julian flinched. I was afraid. Not of dying. I've faced that before. But of being wrong. of accusing my wife and discovering that I had imagined it all, that I was a paranoid old fool who had destroyed his marriage over a chemist's receipt. You were not wrong. No. Sir Julian stared into the fire. I loved her, you know. When we married, I genuinely loved her. She was warm, attentive, everything Margaret had not been. A pause. Margaret was his first wife, Diana's mother, who had died of tuberculosis in 1924. I thought I had been given a second chance. I did not realize I had been given a second sentence. She married you for the estate. From the beginning, I see that now. The attention, the warmth, it was investment. Patient, calculated, long-term investment. And Marcus, poor Marcus, was part of the strategy. An adopted son, positioned as heir. He rubbed his face. I adopted a boy to give him a family. She adopted me to give him a fortune. Marcus. Poirot's tone was careful. Where is he now? Gone to his room. He hasn't spoken since Travers confessed. Sir Julian looked up. He didn't know, Monsieur Poirot. I'm sure of it. Marcus is many things. Sullen, difficult, spoiled. But he is not a conspirator. He genuinely believed Constance was a devoted wife. Poirot inclined his head. I agree. His shock was genuine. The young man will need time. He'll need more than time. He'll need someone to tell him that his mother's crimes are not his inheritance. That, Sir Julian, is something only you can do. A long silence. Then Sir Julian rose, slowly like a man testing joints that have stiffened. I should speak to Diana, and to Lionel. He paused. Lionel, I suppose you investigated him too? I did. His debts are considerable, but his character is not criminal. He is a weak man, not a wicked one. The distinction matters. Sir Julian nodded. At the door he turned. Monsieur Poirot, the title of this affair. What will Captain Hastings call it when he writes it up? Poirot permitted himself a small smile. I suspect he will call it something dramatic. Hastings has a journalist's instinct for the headline. Then tell him this, for the record. It was not the poison that nearly killed me. It was the silence. Knowing something was wrong and saying nothing. Watching my wife's performance every day and choosing to believe it because the alternative was unbearable. He straightened. That is the real crime, Monsieur Poirot. Not the veronal, the pretending. He left. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. I looked at Poirot. It's over then. He shook his head. It is not. What do you mean? Constance is arrested. Travers has confessed. The veronal explains everything. The veronal explains the how. It does not explain the when. Poirot's eyes were sharp, sharper than they had been all evening. Consider, Hastings. Diana told us that Sir Julian changed his will 3 weeks ago. Constance discovered this immediately. Travers told her. The logical response for a woman poisoning her husband would be to administer the fatal dose at once, before the new will could take effect, before evidence could accumulate, before a detective could be summoned. Yes, and yet, 3 weeks have passed. Constance has continued the slow poisoning, but has not struck the final blow. Why? I considered. Perhaps she lost her nerve. Constance Reed does not lose her nerve. She is the most composed woman I have encountered in 30 years of criminal investigation. Then, she was waiting for something. Yes, but for what? Poirot rose and began to pace. She was waiting, Hastings, because the plan required one more element. The slow poisoning would weaken Sir Julian's heart. The fatal dose would stop it. But there must be no suspicion. The death must appear natural, and for that, the performance must be perfect. The household must be in the correct position. Every witness must see what they are meant to see. He stopped pacing. His eyes were very bright. She was waiting for the funeral. But there hasn't been a funeral. Not yet, but I wonder... He moved to the hall and rang for Hargreaves. The butler appeared with his customary impassivity. "Hargreaves, a question. Has Lady Rita, in recent weeks, made any unusual arrangements? Contacted any businesses or tradespeople out of the ordinary?" The butler considered. "Now that you mention it, sir, Lady Reed telephoned Broom and Sons in Ipswich approximately 2 weeks ago. They are undertakers. I took the message when she was unavailable, a Mr. Broom returning her call to confirm details of an arrangement. I assumed it concerned the funeral of a friend or relative." Poirot looked at me. His expression was extraordinary, vindication and horror in equal measure. "The coffin," he said. She ordered the coffin. We drove to Ipswich first thing in the morning. Broom and Sons occupied a sombre shop front near the cathedral. Discreet, established, the kind of business that advertises by reputation rather than signage. Mr. Broom himself received us, a thin man with the permanently sympathetic expression of his profession and the keen commercial instincts beneath it. "Lady Reed placed the order on the 14th of this month," he confirmed, consulting his ledger. "Elm coffin, brass handles, white silk lining. She specified lilies, a very particular variety I recall, and she arranged for our chapel of rest to be prepared." "For Sir Julian Reed?" Mr. Broom hesitated. She did not specify the deceased by name. She said it was for a family member who was gravely ill and whose death was expected shortly. She wished to spare the household the distress of making arrangements after the event. He spread his hands. "It is not uncommon. Many families prefer to prepare in advance." "And the date? Did she specify a date for the funeral?" Broom checked his ledger again. "The 27th of October, this Saturday." I did the mathematics. 3 days from now. Constance had planned to kill Sir Julian before Saturday, have the body prepared by Broom and Sons, and conduct the funeral on the date she had already arranged. The funeral before death, or rather, the funeral arranged before the death, requiring only the death itself to proceed on schedule. Poirot thanked Mr. Broom and we departed. In the car he was silent for a long time. "She planned everything," I said. "The slow poisoning to create the medical history, the coffin ordered in advance, the funeral date selected. She was going to kill him this week, probably tonight or tomorrow, and by Saturday he would be in the ground. With Dr. Cavendish signing the death certificate as a heart failure, with the household testifying to his declining health, with no autopsy, no investigation, no suspicion, except that Diana wrote to you. Except for that." Poirot's voice was soft. "One young woman, alone in a house full of lies, who trusted her instincts and refused to be silent. If she had waited 1 more day, 2 more days, we would have arrived to find a coffin, a funeral, and a death that no one questioned. Thank God she didn't wait. Thank Diana." Poirot adjusted his hat. "God, I think, was rather busy that week." Inspector Japp, armed with the chemist's receipts, Travers' confession, the undertaker's records, and Poirot's testimony, built a case that proved as airtight as any I'd witnessed. Constance Reed was charged with attempted murder by poisoning. Travers was charged as an accessory. The trial, held at the Suffolk Assizes the following spring, lasted 4 days and ended with guilty verdicts for both. Constance received 12 years. She served 9. I'm told she emerged from prison a diminished woman, her composure finally and permanently broken. Not by the walls or the discipline, but by the exposure. The performance that had sustained her for 8 years of marriage could not survive an audience that saw through it. Travers received 5 years. He was struck off the Law Society's rolls and died, not long after his release, of a condition the doctors called pneumonia and his few remaining friends called shame. Marcus Ellery left Longmere Park the day after his mother's arrest and did not return for 3 years. When he did, it was to attend Sir Julian's birthday, his 60th, at Diana's invitation. I am told that the meeting between stepfather and stepson was stiff, awkward, and punctuated by long silences. but they shook hands, and Marcus stayed for dinner. Sir Julian himself recovered fully. Doctor. Cavendish supervised the withdrawal from Veronal, which proved more difficult than the poisoning itself. The body, accustomed to the drug, protested its absence with headaches, tremors, and sleepless nights that lasted weeks. But the baronet's constitution, as Cavendish had always said, was that of a horse. By Christmas, he was striding across his parkland with the vigor of a man 20 years younger, and by the following autumn, he had resumed his duties on the bench with a severity toward poisoners that became legendary in Suffolk legal circles. Lionel Reed paid off his debts. Sir Julian, in a gesture of fraternal generosity that astonished everyone, settled them anonymously. Lionel never learned the source. He assumed it was a windfall from an investment he had forgotten making, and boasted about it in the pub for years. Garrett, the dismissed valet, was reinstated with a full apology, a reference of the most glowing description, and a raise that made him the best-paid personal servant in the county. His wife Alice, whose visits to Longmere had provided Poirot with the crucial evidence, received a pearl brooch from Sir Julian at Christmas, which she wore every Sunday to church, with the pride of a woman whose husband's integrity had been publicly vindicated. And Diana? Diana married a young physician from Cambridge the following year. She invited Poirot to the wedding. He sent his regrets, along with a crystal vase of exquisite proportions and a note that read, "To the bravest woman I've encountered this decade. May your happiness be ordered and your instincts always trusted. H.P." I asked him, afterward, whether the case troubled him. We were back at Whitehaven Mansions. The Montaigne was in its place on the second shelf. The tisane was cooling on the table. London hummed beyond the windows, indifferent as ever to the dramas of Suffolk. Trouble me, Hastings? He considered the question as though it were a piece of fine porcelain, examining it from every angle before setting it down. The Veronal, the forged will that was never made, the coffin ordered for a living man. These are the mechanics of the crime. They are cold, precise, efficient. They do not trouble me. I have seen worse. Then what does? The dinner table. His voice was quiet. Every evening for 8 years, Sir Julian sat across from his wife and believed she loved him. Every evening she poured his wine, touched his hand, asked about his day, and every evening she was calculating the distance between his chair and his coffin. He smoothed his moustache, not with satisfaction, but with something closer to weariness. The poison in the milk is not the horror, Hastings. The horror is the smile with which it is served. That is what the little grey cells cannot forgive. Not the crime, but the performance. The nightly theatre of affection from a woman who had already ordered the flowers for the grave. He rose, moved to the window, and stood with his back to me. I have known many murderers. Some kill in rage, some in desperation, some in madness. These I understand. But the murderer who sits at the family table, who kisses the intended victim good night, who lies beside them in the dark and listens to them breathe and waits. He paused. That is a special kind of evil, Hastings. It is evil that wears patience as its crown. The room was very still. I did not speak. There was nothing to add. After a moment, Poirot turned. His expression had cleared. The cloud passing, the sun returning to its customary position of absolute confidence. But she did not succeed. That is the point. She planned the funeral, yes. She ordered the coffin, the lilies, the silk lining. She selected the hymns and the readings. She prepared everything with the thoroughness of a woman who believed she was smarter than the world. He smiled, a thin, cold, very Belgian smile. She forgot one thing. What? That her stepdaughter could send a telegram.